Greetings, everyone. It's lovely to see all of you on this lovely spring day in Chicago, if you're here. I am Natalie Bennett, the director of UIC's Women's Leadership and Resource Center and the Campus Advocacy Network program. And I want to welcome all of you to today's program and thank you for joining us for this really timely conversation about abortion access and reproductive justice. I'm also incredibly grateful to all of our panelists for first agreeing to share their work and perspectives with us so we can better understand this moment in the long history of struggle for reproductive freedoms in Illinois, in the United States and elsewhere, but also for the many years of commitment, sacrifice, and advocacy and bravery, and for most of all, practicing hope when things seemed impossible. So thank you for being here. So in this moment, and this is a difficult moment for many reasons, I'm happy to be hosting a conversation about abortion access and reproductive justice at UIC. So I think to myself, where else should we be talking about these questions and issues, if not at a public university whose values and ideals assert commitment to justice, equity, access, and inclusion? Those values are always being tested, of course. Right now, our graduate student union is on strike, demanding better wages and workplace protections. The workplace issues they raise about safety, about access to leave, about protection from harassment are also issues of gender justice that the university needs to address. That said, for scholars, educators, students, and staff who study and labor at this university, there's considerable overlap between what we do on campus in our classrooms, in our research, in our writing, and the movement building, social justice work and relationships that we're involved in off campus. So WLRC is very happy to provide a platform for these conversations among scholars, activists, practitioners, and organizations that work to educate, provide reproductive health care, and advocate for justice. These exchanges help all of us to understand what is at stake, what new questions need to be explored, and how we can contribute our skills and expertise to the larger movement for gender justice, racial justice, and sexual autonomy. I want to say also, because we're a university, that our students also need to know the relevance of what's happening around them to their present and their futures. They will become the physicians, the nurses, the legal advocates, the doulas, the policymakers, the social workers, the organizers, the family members who are on the front lines making decisions about pregnancy, about birthing, about childcare. Whether or not they get to take a class with Dr. Gutierrez or Dr. Ricardo or Dr. McMurtry Chubb, access to these conversations helps them to see how white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, ideas of citizenship and sovereignty inform historical policies and current practices that deny choice, deny agency, deny voice, and deny access. They can learn about the range of activism that is taking place and how they can contribute to building a better world. Events like this only come together through partnerships with other university units. So I want to thank Dean Ria Ballard-Thrower of University Libraries, Interim Dean Julie Spanbauer of UIC College of Law, Dr. Jennifer Breyer of Gender and Women's Studies Program, and Lindsay Wright of the Women's Law Caucus in the College of Law. I want to thank all of you for your support and enthusiasm about this program. Because you didn't come to hear me, let me get the program underway. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Elena Gutierrez, who's serving as our moderator for today. After my introduction, Dr. Gutierrez will introduce the panelists, pose a series of questions for them to engage, and after that conversation, we'll open the floor for Q&A. So please do remember to post your questions and comments in the chat. We will gather them and the presenters will respond as time and space allows. Our moderator today is Dr. Elena Gutierrez, Associate Professor in Gender and Women's Studies and Latin American and Latino Studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's a scholar of reproductive justice, Chicana studies, and feminist activism. Her book publications include Undivided Rights, Women of Color Organized for Reproductive Justice, with Jael Silliman, Marlene Gerber-Fried, and Loretta Ross. She's also the author of Fertile Matters, The Politics of Mexican Origin Women's Reproduction with University of Texas Press. That text is the basis for the documentary No Mas Bebes, which documents the targeted sterilization abuse of Mexican origin women in Los Angeles, California, and the lawsuit and activism that followed. She also directs Chicana Chicago, which documents the work of women identified leaders in the city's Mexican origin communities. Dr. Gutierrez is also the curator for the Reproductive Justice Virtual Library, an online research hub that connects organizers and academic scholarship. Her research and writing continue to play an essential role in eliminating family caps from state welfare laws in California and the granting of reparation to victims of sterilization in the state. She has served on the boards of directors of the National Latino Health Organization, Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Health Collective, the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health, Access Women's Health Justice, the Chicago Abortion Fund, the Illinois Coalition for Adolescent Health, and Mujeres Latinas en Acción, and the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. Welcome and thank you to Dr. Gutierrez for moderating this conversation. Over to you, Elena.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Natalie and Ramona, for such a beautiful segue into this program. I already feel the power, and I really want to thank WLRC and all the co-sponsors for supporting this panel, which is so important, I agree, for us to have. And I am super excited to hear everyone speak, and that we all were able to share this space together during this very important moment. I also want to quickly just send a shout out of solidarity, recognition, and power to our graduate student strikers that is currently ongoing. And we are fortunate that this event was scheduled after 4 p.m. Please know that we are with you. And, I'm sure WLRC feels the same way. I'm just expressing my own personal solidarity with the strikers. And with that, I will introduce each of the speakers in turn, and they will share their thoughts, and we will go from there. So first off, I would like to introduce you to Terry Murtry-Chubb, who researches, teaches, and writes in the areas of critical rhetoric, discourse in genre analysis, and legal history. She has lectured nationally on structural discrimination in educational institutions and the workplace, and is a leader in designing curricula to facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. While at Fairhaven College, she served as an assistant professor of law and hegemony studies, and was the co-founder and first director of Fairhaven Center for Law, Diversity, and Justice. Prior to returning to academia, Professor Murtry-Chubb was a civil litigation associate at a mid-sized law firm in Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And I just have a few slides to support my remarks today. So we're talking about abortion futures, but first the past. For me, most things start on Southern antebellum plantations, and our discussion of abortion today is no different. So as I said, abortion futures begins with the past within the formation of the plantation economy. And here we have an archival document from my own collection of plantation records from the Araby plantation owned by enslaver Haller Nutt. Mississippi and Louisiana plantation master Haller Nutt was a shrewd manager of his acquired property. The owner of over 100 enslaved persons by 1843, Nutt was meticulous in his management of their health through various medical directives that he created, compiled, and issued to his overseers. One such tome that you see here, Directions to and Treatment of the Sick, instructed overseers on how to treat various ailments the enslaved suffered, including those related to enslaved women's reproductive health. Nutt instructed, if a woman miscarries, which should never be the case in a well-organized plantation, They should be treated as one that had given birth to a mature child, but allowed a longer time to stay in the house, kept longer in bed, and nursed more carefully. When women miscarry, there is something wrong. She has been badly managed, worked improperly, or she has been to blame herself and should be seriously punished for it when she gets well. Nutt was operating in the universe of a constitution that contained the Fugitive Slave Clause. So Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, in the original version of the Constitution and throughout 1865, no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. We learn about the Three-Fifths Compromise, but the Fugitive Slave Clause was in the Constitution from its inception and its ratification. The clause was later enforced by the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 and 1850, respectively. This broadside, pictured on the right, is directed at the 1850 Act, which expanded the 1793 Act to punish those persons who aided the enslaved in their escape. So there's been several writers writing in the past month, Ellie Mistel at The Nation and this article in Mother Jones about how anti-abortion politicians are now taking inspiration from the Fugitive Slave Act. So now all those historical documents should begin to make a little sense and should result in growing horror on all of our parts. But here we have Missouri House Bill number 1677 and the Texas Senate Bill number 8, also known as the Heartbeat Act. Both bills echo the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 and punishing not only women seeking and receiving abortions, but those who help them. The Heartbeat Act, now law, even goes so far as to create a right in private citizens to bring a civil lawsuit against the women and anyone who helps them and recover amounts up to $10,000 in damages. So as I close my remarks, I just want to emphasize that the state has only been interested in Indigenous women's reproductive labor so far as the removal of Indigenous children from their land by death or erasure through the boarding school system and assimilation. So here you have this picture of these 5 young men at the Carlisle Indian School, and you see their hair has been cut and they've been forced to assimilate into European ways of dress. The state has only been interested in Black women's reproductive labor when it benefited the plantation and post-emancipation economies, as is evidenced by Haller Nutt's instructions to his overseers and apprenticeship laws. Here I have an excerpted apprenticeship law from the state of Georgia, where children of the formerly enslaved are sucked back into service at the plantations where they were just emancipated from, under the guise of the parents not being able to take care of them. And the state has only been interested in immigrant Asian, Latinx, and Caribbean women's reproductive labor to regulate it, from overtaking the births of white children. For example, the forced sterilization at the Irwin Immigration Detention Center in Ocilla, Georgia. Latinx and Caribbean women at this ICE detention center were forcibly sterilized. White patriarchy has used abortion laws to preserve the births of worthy white children to worthy white parents, equals upper middle class or wealthy white parents who can have upper middle class or wealthy white children. In the same way as poor and working class people were drawn into the Civil War, poor and working class white people have been drawn into the white supremacist rhetoric of population control and the preservation of the white race. So here I have a link to Seward Darby's Sister in Hate, or the picture of the book, where, and I'll just leave you with this quote: "For the Aryan Women's League and white nationalist organizations, maternal responsibility is made explicit in their recruiting effort to win the birth rate war by enlisting race-conscious Aryan women who will give birth to a large number of children. In the words of Andrew Anglin, former founder of the neo-Nazi website, The Daily Stormer, quote, 'Any white woman's womb is our womb. It belongs to the males in her society. It belongs to the males in her race.'" So this is the context for our current abortion debates. Thank you so much for your time.
Wow, Terry, thank you so much. On to the next one. Dr. Allison Cowett, she, her, is the Medical Director of Family Planning Associates Medical Group, a Chicago family planning clinic and one of the largest independent abortion care facilities in the country. Dr. Cowett is a faculty member in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. Dr. Cowett is active in community-wide efforts to enhance access to family planning services for women in marginalized populations and to forward a legislative agenda that champions women's reproductive freedom. The floor is yours, Allison.
Thank you so very much for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with you all here in this space. I come to this issue from a slightly different and largely non-academic space, given that I am an obstetrician gynecologist and most of my work is clinical. And I have focused my career for the last 20 years on caring for people who are seeking abortion and contraception. But I really appreciate being here with all of you. And I appreciate so much Professor Terry McCulty-Chubb's words. So much, we know so much of gynecology in the United States is based on some early work and highly unethical and inappropriate research done on slaves during slavery time. So it's a privilege for me to be here amongst all of you and bring the obstetrician gynecologist viewpoint. I'll mention really fast that I have a strong UIC connection. In my first job as an attending OBGYN, I worked at UIC for 10 years and was a faculty member at the School of Medicine, where I focused my teaching on reproductive health, abortion, contraception to our many medical students. And that was very much a highlight for me, was the teaching. So clinically, right now, at our clinical site in downtown Chicago, we focus on abortion and contraception. And we have certainly seen over the last several years that we are seeing a significant increase in patients, people seeking pregnancy from out of state. And this is in direct correlation with the increased amount of bans and restrictions and regulations on abortion in other states, specifically surrounding Midwestern states, but also throughout the country. And this has become, has been in the lay press for quite some time, but has been even more accentuated and highlighted in the lay press since SB 8 in Texas supports a near ban on abortions within Texas, and has led to many women leaving the state to seek abortion care, as well as self-managing their abortions. And as we look forward to the summer and of course expect that Roe v. Wade and Casey will be significantly either dismantled or completely overturned, we are thinking in the clinical setting very importantly and very strongly about what we can do to help our folks from throughout the country. And my clinical work has been the work that has really led me to work in advocacy. I see every single day women and pregnant folks who are seeking abortion and that have overcome significant barriers to be at our clinic and to seek care, financial barriers, missing work, childcare costs, and a number of other, as well as all the restrictions and what people have dealt with to come to be with us and come to advocate for themselves and to recognize and their own bodily autonomy and their ability to seek abortion care. So obviously myself and many of my OBGYN family planning colleagues are so interested in working in the realm of advocacy with all of you in order to really relieve some of these barriers and increase access to abortion. It is such a privilege for me to care clinically for all of these people, and it's such an immense responsibility to be part of this discussion and really be at the table when people are talking about what we stand to lose when Roe is either dismantled or overturned. And I'll say just a few things about that, and I think we'll discuss them a lot more when we have a sort of a discussion amongst the panelists. But the three things that really stand out to me is that for almost 50 years, women have relied on the ability to seek abortion, contraception, and have control over their own reproduction. And I truly believe that that reliance has led to my own personal career successes and abilities to, be a physician and seek the positions and care for people that I have cared for. And I'm sure many other people on this call will feel similarly, in that our rights and our abilities to control our reproduction and to plan our families is really one major part of what's allowed us to be where we are today. Secondly, I truly feel that if we, people that can potentially be pregnant, have the opportunity to be equal partners in our democracy and to achieve everything that they want to achieve personally, we must have a right to abortion and our bodily autonomy. And finally, I'll say, and I hope we'll discuss this a lot more, the bans, regulations against abortion, SB 8 in Texas, and the dismantling or overturning of Roe will certainly have a disproportionate negative effect on marginalized communities, poor women, and women of color. And the status or place for these folks in our society will clearly be worsened post-Roe when abortion is criminalized and many women can be held accountable. And we've seen this in the news recently, especially with the Herrera case in Texas, which we can talk more about. And I'll just read one quote to finish. This is a quote from Rewire News Executive Director and Attorney Jessica Mason-Piccolo, who speaks out consistently about this difficulties and severe problems with the criminalization of abortion. And she said, "It is impossible to ban abortion and not also sweep pregnant people up into a mass surveillance and criminal justice system. Every failed pregnancy is a potential crime, and every pregnant person is a potential criminal." And as I say, I do truly believe that this will, amongst the other access issues, be a major contributor to how this disproportionately affects poor women and women of color and those in other marginalized communities. So thanks again for having me. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion and hearing from the other panelists.
Thank you so much, Allison, and for the issues that you've raised that we can all speak about together. I am thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Yamani Yansa Hernandez, they, who is a visionary and strategic queer Black leader committed to radical compassion and healing justice. Yamani has worked in nonprofit organizations across sectors for 25 years and led reproductive health, rights, and justice organizations for the last decade. Currently, she's writing a memoir and missives on leadership while coaching other leaders through some of the most challenging quandaries of our time. Most recently, Yamani was the executive director of the National Network of Abortion Funds, the NAF, from 2015 to 2022. Before joining the NAF, Hernandez served as the executive director of the state-based Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health. Welcome, Yamani.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I left my role at the National Network of Abortion Funds in January, and this is the first time that I'm getting to actually talk publicly about abortion, about the work, about reproductive justice, and also be in community with folks locally. I am Chicago-based. I grew up here, and I led that work and that organization from here over the last 7 years. I'm thrilled to be on the panel with the folks who are here, and I also don't, just as a heads up, I won't spend too much time talking about abortion funds specifically locally, because we have Megan on the panel who is like deeply entrenched in the work here. And so I thought I'd take a sort of like different angle, sort of bridging what I've done over the last 7 years, and really actually over the last 11 years, even with the adolescent sexual health rights and identities work, because I do think that we tend to segment out abortion as this isolated thing. And, when you start digging into it, really a lot of what makes abortion such a contested issue to talk about is the fact that it's talking about sex and sexuality, and we are deeply uncomfortable talking about sex and sexuality, and that starts really from birth and the time that people are conceived. I will just note, in general, I don't use gendered language when I talk about abortion, because I think that society is evolving enough now to understand that sex and gender are really a spectrum, and that there is a really wide range of people who are impacted by the pregnancy experience. I am someone who has been pregnant. I have 2 children. I also have had an abortion, and I've also experienced pregnancy loss. So I feel like I've been through the spectrum of a sort of reproductive health. And I'll add that I'm 44. At 40, I discovered that I'm intersex, something that I always kind of had an idea about, but I didn't really have language for, which is basically a term that is used to talk about the spectrum of what sex can look like, which ranges from what our bodies look like, what our hormones look like, what our chromosomes look like. And I think that I've been trying to surface that more in my introductions and when I talk to people, because I think that sometimes we collapse this issue into something that is so small and it's really connected to so much more about humanity and our bodies and our lives and identities. But I'll just say briefly, abortion funds are local grassroots organizations on the ground who actually make abortion possible. They've been around for as long as Roe has been around and longer, that recognize that actually the legal right to abortion has never ensured access to abortion, and there has always been a need for help to pay for abortion, to get people to their abortions, to watch people's children while they go to care, all of those things, house people, transportation. And so the network that I led was kind of like was the membership organization for that group of abortion funds that are both funding abortion, but also we, say building power. So not just, kind of thinking of that work as charity or a transactional relationship, but something that is transformative and organizing work to change the societal conditions that make the work necessary. But the thing that I kind of wanted to bring to this conversation is just what I've pivoted to in my work is really supporting leadership and organizations, because I think that we get very, the conversations are about the advocacy, about the issues, but we don't really talk about the infrastructure that is needed to power these movements. The people that we put on pedestals who are our heroes, we talk about both providers and leaders, being these heroes. And those people are carrying incredible amount of weight and responsibility and guilt in some cases, feeling like they are, responsible for so much of our liberation. There's just a lot of support that's needed for individuals doing the work and leading the work, and also organizations. You know, a lot of us come to this work because we're really passionate about it, but we don't necessarily have we've not run businesses, which is what these organizations are. You know, they're legal entities that have, you know, responsibilities to the state. You know, we have to file taxes, we have to pay people, we have to think of worker justice, we have to think of, you know, it's all of these issues that actually the right targets organizations on, because they know that there are weaknesses sometimes in knowing how to keep operations going and keep in compliance and all of those things. It's the non-sexy parts of the work that are also very, very necessary. And so I've kind of shifted my attention and my labor to supporting the infrastructure that makes the work possible. And that is ranging from, you know, helping figure out how to resource organizations to helping organizations be who they are inside, and the same organizations inside that they are outside, you know, espouse those values outside, actually practice them inside and operationalize them, be good to their employees, be compassionate, look at policies and procedures and how to be sustainable, have emotional intelligence, all of those things. And so I appreciate all of the other expertise that is on this panel, from advocacy and legal and clinical, and that's what I'm bringing here. It's just kind of like representing the infrastructure that it takes to make these things go.
Thank you so much, Imani, for everything that you shared to broaden this conversation and the work that you do. Our next speaker is Megan Jafo, who is she, her, who is a mama who has had abortions. She currently serves as the executive director of the Chicago Abortion Fund, CAF. Megan is an expert in navigating onerous restrictions and barriers to abortion care across the Midwest, informed by conversations with thousands of CAF callers and her own experiences obtaining care, and supports people with tenacity and softness. Megan is a storyteller with We Testify, an organization dedicated to the leadership and representation of people who've had abortions, increasing the spectrum of abortion storytellers in the public sphere, and shifting the way the media understands the context and complexity of accessing abortion care. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone. It's been so great to hear from this group so far. I'm really excited about what I've learned so far and how we can all work together in the coming months, because we're going to need all of us in order to continue to support people here in Illinois and people traveling to Illinois and across the region to access abortion care when Roe goes away. And I just want to say, I did get a text right before this panel started that Kentucky now has legal abortion again. And that just like was a really bright spot and a hard week. Right when that happened, the Chicago Abortion Fund was immediately had an increase in our callers from Kentucky. And those are people who are already traveling to Illinois. So this is just a harbinger. I never know how to say that word of what's happening, but it feels good to have a win. And I'm just really happy for our sibling funds in Kentucky and around the region who've been working to help people access care. So yeah, I'm with the Chicago Abortion Fund. We are a member of the National Network of Abortion Funds, which grew a lot under Imani's leadership. And so I just want to like shout her out for that and really thank her for lifting up the need for infrastructure and for investment in organizations like abortion funds who have been doing this work for decades. Our callers have been in post-Roe world for decades, and we do need deep investment to be able to continue because as restrictions around the region have increased in the last few years, we've had to give it all we've got. And if we're already exhausted, that's not good for June. So just want to say that. So yeah, I mean, abortion funds are really unique in that we address the barriers to care beyond the legal framework. And at CAF, we work alongside our callers because we know they're the experts of their own lives, and together alongside them, we'll do whatever it takes to connect them to the care they want and need. So we do that through relationships with clinics like Family Planning Associates. We work with about, right now, over 50 clinics across 7 states. And we have a really small but mighty staff and around 30 volunteer case managers that help us do this work. So we provide funding for procedures and then really intensive logistical time-consuming work to navigate the barriers that people are facing right now. So that here in Illinois, that's helping people to determine their Medicaid status if they don't have Medicaid and getting them enrolled into Medicaid. It's helping them find clinics that accept Medicaid if they have Medicaid. It's helping them figure out how to argue with their insurance company to provide care, to cover care, because we do have some laws here that cover abortion care, that insurance covers abortion care, though not enough. We need to do some serious work on that. And then we support with any kind of logistical support that's needed. So figuring out how to have people get additional funding, transportation plans, childcare, things like that. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm really proud that we kind of immediately introduced mini grants to our callers, which range from about $50 to $100 that they can use on whatever they need. So if it's like, groceries or a light bill or something, we know that people need more than access to abortion to live their lives. And if we can contribute something in a small way, then we're going to try to do that. And we've really tried to make the case to our supporters that that's also a critical part of supporting people, is offering all kinds of wraparound supports so that they aren't, constantly moving money around to pay for a medical procedure that should be free. And we also, in addition to our direct service, I'm really proud of our work in research and advocacy and culture shift. And we think this is just as critical as our work supporting people having abortions. We recognize the role that we as abortion funders and people who have abortions need to occupy to change the existing landscape for abortion access and abortion justice, because what we're doing right now is not working. The narrative, the dominant narrative we have, is not working. It's not loud enough. It's not strong enough. It's my space heater. That's working. So through that work, we're helping to shape public narratives and policy, and we think this complements our efforts in ensuring that anyone who has access to care can get it, and that they're not further stigmatized by it. And I just want to add, in a lot of our work, because of abortion stigma in our communities, we're the only people that folks are talking to or telling about their desire to seek an abortion. And if we're not extremely upfront and loud about how we feel about abortion, if we're not like having these conversations at our dinner table, if we're not having them with our friends, if we're not posting about it on social media, somebody in your community might need an abortion and need a ride or need a meal or need support, and they don't know that they can go to you. And so I think it's really important that we make that clear, because abortion stigma is a huge barrier that is not addressed enough. And I just, wanted to lift that up. So thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing the work that you and all those at CAF do. I think it's fair to say that you all might be seeing the future a little bit more clearly than we are, and we can talk more about that in a bit. Our last speaker is Kim DiRiccardo, who joined the UIC Law faculty in 2008 and has also been visiting professor at Seattle Law, UNLV, and DePaul. She's currently a Fulbright Scholar in Argentina, hosted by the Ambrosio Lucas Gioja Institute of Legal and Social Research at the University of Buenos Aires, Faculty of Law. Sorry, excuse me if I totally botched that. At UIC, she teaches criminal law and procedure, lawyering skills, and seminar classes on race, gender, and class. Professor Ricardo's scholarly writing considers redress and reparations law, policy, and social movements in the United States, and her most recent article considers US and Argentinian abortion law and policy from a comparative perspective. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. And I just really want to quickly say to Dr. Bennett and the rest of the staff at the Women's Leadership and Resource Center, thank you for organizing the event, as well as thank you to the rest of the co-sponsors. I'm really excited to be on this panel, especially having the luck of kind of introducing myself last year and listening to all of the good work that everybody on the panel is involved with at various levels. But, you know, from my position as a law professor, it's really nice to be able to hear what providers and advocates are doing on the ground. So I also, Dr. Gutierrez, I wanted to thank you for inviting us to sort of introduce ourselves along with our kind of more formal bios. As a law professor, I often feel like when I'm teaching class, based only on my position at the front of the classroom, students kind of give me a certain authority, a certain amount of expertise, which I think I do have, right, based on my CV. But I think it's important that we're also invited to be transparent about our backgrounds, about our lived experiences, about our attitudes and values that bring us to the work that we do. And so I appreciate what everybody has already shared about themselves and their work. And that's what I'm going to try to do as well. So I'm Kim Ricardo, and I'm a law professor at UIC. I have never had an abortion, but I have been in a position, fortunately, to be able to support many, many friends and family members who have decided to seek abortion, including one friend during when I was a student who had to fly back to the United States from a Latin American country where she could not obtain an abortion. She had to fly back home to receive care and then sort of restart what she was doing. So that's part of the perspective I bring to this work. Also in around 2016, I started traveling more regularly to Argentina. And so was actually here in Buenos Aires on the ground during the first debates on the decriminalization bill in 2018, where the campaign for legal and safe and cost-free abortion lost narrowly in the Argentinian Senate. In 2020, at the end of the year, because of the pandemic, I was in my living room watching the live stream coverage of the Senate debates. And around 4 o'clock in the morning, local time, when it was finally announced that the IVE law, the voluntary interruption of pregnancy law, had finally passed. And so I was there virtually with the rest of the people on the ground, mainly women, who were jumping up and down and screaming and crying and dancing once the announcement was made, and then over the loudspeakers in the plaza in front of Congress, around Congress, Natalia Lafourcade's song Hasta la Raíz started to play. So those are the kind of memories and sort of touch points that inform sort of my approach to this work. And so today, what I'm hopefully going to be able to add to the conversation is a comparative international perspective, talking in general about Latin America, but really focusing in on what's been happening on the ground in Argentina.
think I'm unmuted, yes? Thank you so much for that introduction, Kim, and also to everybody for sharing so much of yourselves, not just the academic or the work that you do, but also so much of who you are, and as Kim said, right, your values and what leads you to the work. I think that, it's very much a part of how reproductive justice is seen, right? We're a whole people. So thank you for bringing your whole selves to the conversation. And I think I want to follow up a little bit on the suggestion that was made to be a little bit louder, right? That we all need to be very loud about this issue. And I feel like each of you kind of touched on it and, spoke to some of, the problems that we're having, right, with having focused on Roe v. Wade for so long. And so I'd like to ask, whoever would like to speak about that, what do you really see as kind of, what did Roe miss, or what was right about Roe v. Wade? What are the limits of legality? How should we respond now that we know, how Roe v. Wade really wasn't, right, the answer to access for everyone?
I'm going to jump in here as
Please.
a lawyer. So I think that for too long, progressive minded people, folks who would identify themselves as liberal, have kind of lean too heavily on the court as, a bastion of civil rights protection or even just recognition. I think it's important that Roe happened in 1973, and it has certainly, whatever it's done, it's changed the landscape. It's provided the opportunity for a 50-year-long conversation in this country that has today led to the fact that the majority of Americans, vast majority of Americans, do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. But Roe itself had really important flaws. And so when we, I think I like to talk about reproductive justice from a feminist perspective, and Roe v. Wade is not a feminist opinion. Roe v. Wade privileges the role of the physician in the decision making. It recognized that a woman has a right of privacy under the Constitution, but the principal actor in that decision making process was always the physician, with only the woman sort of serving a secondary role in that decision making process. So it's a very flawed opinion for that reason. And also because the opinion, in my view, focuses too much on privacy as a mechanism for recognizing that right, instead of, I think, the more salient kind of issue here, which is equality and equity. The fact that control over our reproductive decisions, right, is something that allows folks who can get pregnant, mainly women, right, to have the opportunity to control their own destinies, to make decisions about their lives, about when and whether to start to have children, right? And so I think that as we look to this place where we know everybody just is anticipating that Roe is going to go away, first of all, I think it's already gone, right? Essentially, for all intents and purposes, Roe is already gone. We saw that the Supreme Court, through its shadow docket in allowing SB 8 to move forward in Texas, Roe is functionally gone. So I suppose I'm really interested in hearing what other folks have to say about kind of what a post-Dobbs kind of world looks like. If in fact the court decides to use Dobbs as a vehicle to overturn Roe and Casey.
And I echo those remarks. I mean, I teach the actual briefs from the Roe v. Wade decision in my social justice lawyering class. And one of the things I ask the students to focus on is that these briefs are the brief for Roe is so incredibly long. It's like 99 pages and mired in just technical medical determinations of like these discussions of when life begins, totally missing the whole point about women's autonomy, about over their own bodies and reproductive choices, and more importantly, the context in which these decisions happen. And as Yamini invited us to think about all of the people who are impacted by these decisions, right? You know, communities, families, all of us who are connected together. And so, I mean, the case was deeply flawed, comes out of Texas, right? And now we're back with Senate Bill 8, which is now the Texas heartbeat bill, where we can sue women and sue providers and get money like private citizens. I mean, we have to think about like, who does this serve, and why is this discussion happening this way? And I think it was Allison who called upon us to, you know, change the narrative about what we're talking about here, which I think is incredibly important going forward.
And I'll just make the comment too, that as we've said, for many women and people who can get pregnant in the United States, access despite Roe has been, you know, unavailable. Abortion care and reproductive rights have been not at all available, despite the protections afforded by Roe and Casey. And that is because of all of the problems that we're talking about: poverty, lack of medical care and coverage for medical care. We know that 75% of women who seek abortions are poor. And we know that 50% of women and families that rely on Medicaid for their insurance coverage live in states where abortion is not covered by Medicaid. So this, you know, the abortion funds, Megan and Yamini and people that work in these funds, as well as providers such as myself, we know how much people struggle to come in and seek these services. So, and I think that we are only going to see, I know that we are only going to see more of this struggle post Dobbs. And essentially people keep arguing like, well, will Roe be dismantled or completely overturned? And I keep saying, I don't really think it matters. As if when Dobbs is upheld, even if Roe is not overturned, it's essentially an overturning of the viability standard, and therefore people can, now I'm acting like I'm the lawyer, but that people can, you know, pass laws that will essentially make abortion inaccessible 100%. So I agree too. We need to think about that and think about changing the narrative and holding up bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom, as opposed to the tenets of Roe.
Right. And Allison, the only thing that I wanted to highlight from what you've said is this kind of slow dismantlement of Roe has been there always, right? After Roe, almost immediately, we get the Hyde Amendment. We get the Supreme Court saying that other states or state governments can also prevent the use of public funds to provide abortion medical care. And then, you know, we just have a slow hacking away every year through legislation or through litigation, getting rid of what you know, originally the court said was this fundamental right to access abortion. And so a lot of this is just not new, right? When we talk about what's going to happen after Roe goes away.
Yeah, I want to add to the narrative piece. Like, this group knows it's not new, but people don't know it's not new. And I really thought that the failure of the Supreme Court to act in Texas would have galvanized a very large part of the population to kind of listen to what we have been saying for years, and that has not happened. And Kentucky banned abortion for 7 days, and I wanted to share information about that with our team, and I found one news article. So like the general apathy, and I know there's many reasons for that, but it is a narrative problem, and there's two things that I'm thinking about as we at the Chicago Abortion Fund figure out what we are going to say when this happens to various groups, primarily number one, people who are seeking abortion, that, you know, abortion is still legal in however many states. Here in Illinois, obviously we know we have enshrined protections, but that abortion is legal and going to be accessible to a select group of people. And we need to make sure people understand who has been left behind and who is going to continue to be left behind. And then there's a part about the 15-week ban and the magic the right has done in their messaging and their narrative. There are people who are pro-choice who think 15 weeks is viability. There are friends of mine who I've had conversations with about abortion over 12 weeks of pregnancy that have been pregnant before, and because of how well of a job the other side has done with their messaging, getting that out into the public, and because of the reticence to talk about abortion publicly, like our whole, the actual science has completely been hijacked. And my biggest concern is that the left and people that are pro-choice are going to see the 15-week ban as a compromise, and they're not going to get out into the streets over it, or to vote over it, or to act about, or to support, you know. So those are like two things. And I did talk to someone recently who said there's been various communications and polling research done that says people don't think Roe is going away. They do not think it's going to happen, particularly people in blue states who it's not going to affect as much. They think it's okay, and this is like directly from a communications consultant person, that, you know, people are like, well, I probably won't need an abortion. And if I do, I'll just ask my friend, or I'll help my friend, or I'll do those things. These things aren't going to happen to me. And I can't tell you how many people I have personally spoken to on the Chicago Abortion Fund hotline that say, well, I mean, I'm pro-life, but I have kids, and I can't raise another kid. I can't afford it. I have to take care of, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, everybody else too. But they're, you know, publicly saying one thing, voting another way. And so, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know this is just the one question, but it really gets at so much. So I hope it's okay to chime in with another comment on that, of just kind of like, what does the post-Dobbs environment look like? And I think, you know, the thing is that abortion is as old as pregnancy. Like, for as long as people have been getting pregnant, people have been deciding whether or not to carry those pregnancies. And I think that, you know, to sort of like make the connection both to what Megan said around people's knowledge about what pregnancy is, what viability is, all of these questions that lawmakers actually don't actually know the fucking answer to, because they don't have sex education. Like, we don't have that in this country. There's not comprehensive sex and sexuality education is not a thing here. So people don't even know what they're talking about. But I think that what needs to happen, and what's going to happen, is that we have to get back to the sort of like ancestral and community wisdom that we've learned, that we've known in the past about about our bodies, learning what our cycles are, learning when you can get, I mean, I know personally growing up, all I heard was don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant. It was never like, actually, you have about 6 days of the month that you can get pregnant. You know, like, it was never, explained like there's not a constant threat of pregnancy. There are ways to be aware of your body and, you know, sort of like live your life according to that. And then also, you know, what to do once you do find yourself pregnant. I mean, I think this case in the recent case in Texas, with the arrest and the bond, and, you know, medical professionals, nurses, you know, basically like reporting things that they don't have to report. I think getting closer to the ground and helping people understand what's going on with their bodies, what to say, what not to say, what to do when they need help. All of those things are important. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that I think we have to keep putting this in the context of the rise of fascism and the fact that this is not just about abortion. This is about every single thing that the right does not like, does not approve of, et cetera else, whether it's a book and what you're reading, whether it's being your gender identity, whether it's whether your pregnancy continues. So I think that ignorance and apathy of like, oh, this might not happen it's going to be a big shock for people. And there's going to be a huge need for survival planning, for figuring out, for knowing your neighbors, knowing how to get food, how to take care of yourself, how to educate your family, and all of these things in the absence of moving into an environment in this country that we've thought we would never be in. That, oh, that's over there, that's those countries, that's that. And we're going that direction. And so I think getting political education, talking to each other about what is actually happening in this country, not just in isolation, it's not just abortion, this is about fascism. That's what, and we need to call it that, and we need to start educating each other about what that means. And I think that is what I'm hoping and thinking about, like post Dobbs, is like, it's more. This is not the only thing. It's going to impact every single area of life. Sorry to be negative, Nancy, or Debbie Downer here, but it's more than this.
Well, I asked you to be loud, so thank you for understanding the assignment. Anybody want to respond or add anything else before I ask one more question and then we open it up to the broader audience?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that women's bodies have always been the site of patriarchal imaginations and designs. And so often patriarchy operates through controls over us in laws and regulations, but they're oppressive structures for all of us. So while regulating us might be the start, it's just I guess a peep into the larger designs on society. And we're seeing that now, as Yamini says, like, this is about the rise of fascism. And the quote that I read from Sisters in Hate, I mean, the book is a really good book, very scary. Not good bedtime reading, but you can just see how, like, the propaganda within the white supremacist community is about like having all of these babies and controlling the birth rate war, and about, you know, preserving this very negative white racial identity through women's bodies. And so control over the birth is integral, it's linked to the rise of white supremacy and the rise of fascism.
I just wanted
Again,
to add as well.
I'd like
Oh,
to-
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that, you know, I'm so glad that Yamini just kind of broke open the egg, right, with the very direct way that she kind of has just spoken about the rise of fascism, and that how all of what we're seeing, book bans, CRT bans, don't say gay, you know, all of this anti-abortion activism and legislation, it's all connected. And I don't think we can avoid seeing that. And like Megan says, we need to get kind of direct and in people's faces with information. I had something that I was going to say specifically, but it's escaped me. So go ahead, Allison.
I was going to agree and say that I think for me personally, and I think for women often in academics or in positions of leadership, we are told often that we are overreacting or that we are being hyperbolic about problems or situations. And I think it is right now impossible to be hyperbolic about the road ahead and what we are up against. You know, in the world of clinical care, abortion and family planning, we know full well that abortion is not the what the right is looking to, the only thing. They're not going to stop there. They're certainly coming also for our birth control, and our ability to just, again, operate as full members of our democracy. So I'm in complete 100% agreement that we do need to be loud, even in spaces where that's uncomfortable. And there are a lot of spaces like that. And I'll also say, I think everyone is so right that we need completely different messaging. And that means we need different public health messaging. And we need to really coordinate and cooperate with, agencies that are good at this kind of get the word out about how important this is for your own health and about, how your body works. I'm doing my part by taking my middle school daughter and all of her 8th grade friends to pro-choice rallies and all that. So I can answer a lot of questions for them about their bodies and what's happening as we're making our pro-choice signs the night before the rally. So that's my plan, my personal plan, but certainly it needs to be on a much more state and national level.
Do folks have other suggestions for issues, areas, information that students, activists, academics, practitioners, organizations should be paying attention to, should know about? How do we find this information? How do we resource ourselves in our communities in this particular moment, given everything that you all have positioned, right, as a challenge to that?
I think, the more I do justice work, the more I realize the importance of having a deep bench of people and having people to support and step in when you're just utterly exhausted. And I think the sustainability aspect is huge because you've got people like Megan and Yamani and who are on the ground and have been working like in many ways. They're like modern day what society would be like, Chicken Littles, like the sky is falling, and everyone's like, no, it's not, and you're like, yeah, no, it really is. And so they've been saying this for years, and now the sky really is falling, and now they're like, and now we're exhausted because we've been working for the eventuality that the sky would be falling, and now it's falling, right? But it takes a toll because you are the person who understands what the stakes are, right? You're dealing on the ground with people every day. Allison is a provider, understanding what this means, and then being able to communicate that in a way that is effective and to maintain your own sanity and your own health and well-being. Those are huge challenges. And so I think we run the risk of people just burning out or pushing themselves in ways that will eventually lead to emotional, psychological, and physical declines. And so I think that's something that we really have to spend some time on.
I maybe want to share a little bit about just to kind of reinforce, I think, what we've already heard about how important infrastructure, having a deep bench, as Terry says, thinking through really kind of strategically and from a long-term perspective, right? How are we going to change the narrative? How are we going to provide information? And based on, again, on my experience here in Argentina, back in before 2018, certainly before 2020, a lot of the sort of frustration on the ground here in Argentina was the United States has had legal abortion since 1973. We are decades behind. Why are we so far behind? And in the end, it might look like the slow but steady kind of work, the sort of capacity building, the democracy building, the sort of information sharing, the narrative, the changing of the public discourse, the introduction of legal abortion, pregnant people, this type of vernacular into the daily conversations that people are now having on the ground in Argentina and other parts of Latin America, has really been the important work. I mean, in a way, right, having the Supreme Court in 1973 decide that women had a right to an abortion was momentous, was huge, but it was also momentary. Immediately following, we had restrictions coming left, right, and center, right? And by contrast, what's been happening in Latin America has been a much slower sort of democratic process that involves not just sort of, you know, the politicking, right, gaining the majoritarian, you know, politics and getting legislatures to get on board, but it's also been about changing the culture, changing attitudes, changing framing, right? So a big part of that change in framing has been about recognizing the failure of privacy as a legal framework to base the abortion right on, right? Instead, in Argentina, you know, activists took some time to try to understand the flaws in privacy, to sort of move and shift the conversation from privacy and an individual right to a social justice perspective, one that, you know, centers personal autonomy, personal health, or, you know, decision making, and, you know, really making it a larger human rights issue than, I think, the sort of very narrow individual focus that we as just Americans always have when it comes to our lives, right? So I think that's a huge thing. I noticed earlier that Megan, I didn't open the link, but I think that based on the text description, you're talking about the socorristas, who are an on-the-ground group who's focused not just on providing information, but also kind of providing accompanying care, right? Taking women and pregnant people to get their abortions in, you know, before 2020, before this was, you know, sort of officially legal. And not only that, but thinking about post-abortion care, what type of resources folks are going to need after they get the sort of medical procedure done with, right? What, you know, like you said, groceries and things like that, tissues and you know, et cetera. So as we look forward to, you know, understanding what the new sort of legal landscape looks like in the United States. And by the way, I think maybe a little bit too nefariously, I think that one of the sort of most devastating things to our current politics and our current conversation about abortion rights in this country could be if the Supreme Court decides to technically uphold Roe and Casey, because, you know, the court, just like everybody, knows we're in midterm election year. I think they're also very much aware about the lightning rod that overturning Roe could be in this country during a big election year. You know, as Megan pointed out earlier, right, they've effectively, the court as an institution has effectively allowed, you know, the protections of Roe to be set aside, and states are willing to be devious, and like Texas, Idaho. So I just want to kind of emphasize Megan's call to talk about these things. I know, for example, Ms. Magazine has sort of restarted their We've Had Abortions campaign. I think it's really important to talk, to have those conversations, to be frank and open and honest. I think, you know, things like TikTok videos explaining where to get resources, you know, how our bodies operate, for example, also really important. Because I'm, you know, coming to the end of my days of being, you know, having reproductive capacity, but you know, it's the younger folks who are going to be needing this information, and getting that information out to them in the format that they have, or they have access to it and they use, I think is really important.
Thank you, Yamani, Megan, Allison.
Well, I mean, I am never going to miss the opportunity to ask people to donate to abortion funds. It's one of the most direct ways you can make abortion possible. So, and really, literally every dime counts. And, you know, I think when a lot of people, the general public, when they think about abortion, they often think about Planned Parenthood. And I think it's really important that people understand that there is so much more. There's a large ecosystem of who is a part of the constellation of things that make abortion possible. Independent clinics, for instance, are the people who provide most of the abortions in this country. And most people don't even, you know, just general public don't recognize, like they just like sort of lump abortion and Planned Parenthood together. So I always try to let people know independent clinics are like the ones that are the people who are really doing the heavy lifting in this country around abortion. And, you know, independent clinics and abortion funds kind of like go together. They're like besties. I really, this is the largest fundraiser, grassroots fundraiser of the year is happening right now. Fundathon used to be called Bolathon. You can, I think somebody just dropped a link in the chat. And that's always an available option anytime.
I'll just echo what Yamani said. The best way to support independent clinics like Family Planning Associates really is to donate to the abortion funds that we work with, since we don't and are not able to take private donations. But I also want to say, I think we are so frustrated with the current landscape for access, and we're really struggling to take care of people. And we're all, as Terry said, you know, in serious jeopardy of feeling just kind of overwhelmed and generally sad about the landscape. I do think that I always try to remind myself, and I would really encourage others to do the same, that you do have a voice in terms of your vote. I mean, people really feel like their vote is not that important in Illinois, but it is. It's, you know, calling your the reasons that we have that we enjoy the privilege of a blue state and an abortion-friendly state, and why we passed Medicaid coverage for abortion in 2018, and why we passed the Reproductive Health Act in 2019, and why we just repealed parental notice in Illinois, is because we have a majority pro-choice legislature, General Assembly, and governor. And that is not by mistake. You know, 30 years ago, Illinois looked like the surrounding states in terms of politics. And there are, you know, the political advocates, the progressive folks like Personal PAC and the ACLU and other really great organizations that are working day and night, you know, just as hard as any of the rest of us that are doing legal work or abortion care or funding or any of these things to keep pro-choice candidates in office. So when people are wondering what can they do, you know, call your legislators, go visit your legislator, you know, email them, text them, and let them know that if they have been friendly to these pro-choice abortion legislation campaigns, that you thank them, and we need to keep them in office and campaign for them. And, you know, that I feel like sometimes helps me ward off the frustration and feeling burnt out, because we do have power, and we do have, even as individuals, and we can really feel privileged that we live in Illinois, but we can't be content with our pro-choice status and our wonderful rights. We really have to keep focused. There's lots of people downstate that would like to change the dynamic and the laws in Illinois about abortion. So we really have to keep up pressure on our legislators.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like, you know, I only go on CAF's Twitter. I don't have my own Twitter, which is probably good. But I swear every time I open it, JB Pritzker is talking about abortion, which I know it's the algorithm, but it's fine. But if you're going to talk about abortion, then we also need to make sure, if you're going to campaign about abortion, you need to expand abortion access. Yes, Illinois has, much better laws than surrounding states, but that doesn't mean that everything in Illinois is butterflies and rainbows. The majority of calf callers in Illinois, who we support, that aren't eligible for Medicaid, have private insurance, and they still don't have, $4, $5, $6, $7, $1,000. Allison knows $2,400, $2,480, for a medical procedure, because that's not what people have in this country. We don't have the resources we need in this country. So I think like we in Illinois have a responsibility to protect and expand access. And so kind of talking, when we talk about building a deep bench, like, there are advocacy organizations. Chicago Abortion Fund does advocacy work. If you want to get involved, we will put you to work getting involved in that. And then also just to bring it back to the narrative change, and kind of, I forget who said it, but like my dad is like an old leftist and used to talk about like, political consciousness raising, like potluck dinners and things like that. And I know we haven't been able to gather in community for a really long time. And I do think that's had an impact on kind of how we're feeling about the current political moment, that we haven't been able to like, even just being on this panel and seeing you all, me and Allison are like in the DMs, like, we're going to go get together. And, just like having that to get you through kind of like the darkness of all of this is really important. And having these conversations in your community with your children, situating abortion care in the context of other struggles for liberation that people are like familiar with and find more palatable. Like, we need to explain to them why this is just as important, why this is a racial justice issue, an economic justice issue, a gender justice issue, as NNAF has done so well in like pushing forward. And finally, like as a parent who talks to a lot of parents who are seeking abortion care on the hotline at CAF, and always, with kids in the background and joking about our kids and what our kids need, the more that our movement can frame this as a child's issue, an issue that deeply, deeply affects children. This pushing abortion out of reach, denying someone an abortion, deeply affects existing children that are here, that are already under-resourced due to the inequities like baked into everything in this country. So like reframing that and making this a family issue when we talk about abortion, I think will go a really long way.
Thank you so much, Megan. That really kind of gives us some, perspective. I'm sorry, Megan, to gives us some perspective to thinking about the future. We have to move on because sadly our time is already up, but I'm going to invite the speakers to answer the one question that we have from the audience, or one of the questions we have from the audience, which is what gives you hope? And if you can answer in that in the chat while Natalie sends us home, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for everything that you shared today and all the work that you do.
While you answer that question, what gives you hope? I can certainly answer it for myself, that this conversation was absolutely fantastic, very much needed. And I think I know what my assignment is. And a lot of that comes from opening up this conversation about how do we talk about reproductive justice in a kind of full, expansive way that kind of brings in those who are already committed to the cause, who are already part of the movement, but those who are trying to figure out what their accountability is, what their relationship is, how is it relevant to them? And I think we have touched on quite a bit. I feel like we needed another day. I definitely echo Megan's like wanting to be in community, because I feel like had this been in person, the energy would have been just off the chain, right? And so I really thank all of you for saying yes to this and for really showing up today and for, I think, inspiring, but also educating all of us, because there's a lot that I learned that I did not know. And I look forward to doing this again with you in another space, in another time. And so thank you so much.